KB6NU. I've taught lots of classes, and in fact, I even gave this talk at Dayton many years ago, although I've kind of updated it a little bit. First off, let me ask you, how many of you teach classes? Okay, so that's a good number. And have you been teaching one-day tech classes?
No.
No?
2 days.
2 days? Well, that's good too. Okay, so let's take a look here. Whoops. So what is a one-day tech class? Well, some people call it a hate cram. I kind of don't like that term because it's, while there is some element of cramming, I actually do try to teach something, not just the answers, but I don't get into the material really deeply. So you teach the answers to the test, but I also like to give people some understanding of what they're all about. So why is it?
There was something.
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to change this to click. Let's go to display settings. And let's just do.
Tell it to KB. Then you can close out the window. There you go.
Oh my God.
All right.
Recenter that because I had it off
Yeah.
screen a little bit. Go full screen. Yeah, just double click on that. Yeah, full screen. There you go. Come on. Go to full screen. There we go.
Sorry about that. So when I do one-day tech classes, I do 6 hours of instruction, okay? And you can decide whether or not that's cramming or not. And we follow the 6 hours of instruction immediately with a test session so that they forget as little as possible. Oh man, what's the deal with this? So why a one-day tech class? Well, this is the reason why. People come to the class, most of them get their licenses that same day. They're very happy people. When they're happy, I'm happy, right? But the real reason is it's easier on students. It's easier on students, it's easier on instructors. And my theory on this is that most people learn by doing anyway, and you can't learn by doing if you don't have a license, right? So my philosophy on this is let people get their licenses, then let them start learn by doing. Now, are all of them going to do that? Well, no. I don't know if you folks were in this session yesterday where the guy talked about how we should revamp ham radio education. Well, he's got a lot of ideas, but I don't think they're tied to reality, to tell you the truth. But anyway, this is why I do it. And over the years, I've taught I've got hundreds of students who've gotten their licenses in my classes. So I think I'm probably doing something right. So I get criticized a lot about one-day tech classes, and in my mind, traditional classes don't give students that much more instruction, right? If you take a typical 8-week class, maybe a 10-week class, 2 hours a night, that's 20 hours of instruction. Well, I'm still giving them like half that amount of instruction, half or a third of that instruction. And this is all very technical material. You know, that little bit more isn't going to teach them all that much more, I don't think. And despite complaints that students don't really learn the material, I haven't found that to be the case. They're really bound to learn something, even if it's abbreviated kind of class. A lot of times I'll have people come up to me after a class and say, I read through the manuals and I know some of the answers, but your explanations have really made it more clear to me. So it's just not true that people just are learning answers to questions. And the one thing I like about this, there's no or very few dropouts. In fact, I've only had one person not stay through the whole one-day tech class. And this is kind of funny. I saw the guy nodding off. We start right off with Ohm's Law, right? And I saw the guy nodding off, and he left at the first break. He said, at the end, he says, he was a friend of mine, actually. He says, I had a long night last night. This was on a Saturday morning. I just can't stay awake here. I said, yeah, go home, come back the next time. And he eventually got his license too. So, what do you need to do to teach a one-day tech class? Well, the first thing is to find a venue, right? Public libraries are a good venue. I've taught at public libraries. Maker spaces, I've taught at maker spaces. Town halls, I don't know if I've ever taught at a town hall. Red Cross buildings, I've taught at Red Cross buildings. And churches, I've taught at churches. So I've taught at all these different places. And a lot of times they'll give you the venue. I even taught here at Dayton one time, a couple of times actually. Unfortunately, that wasn't free. All these other ones are generally free. So, what are the important parts about a venue? Well, you need to accommodate the number of students that you expect, right? You don't want to cram them in necessarily. It needs to be available by 8:30 or 9 a.m. to about 6 p.m. So if you have 6 hours of instruction, you got a half hour for lunch, 15-minute afternoon breaks. You're going to be going till 5 or 6 p.m. And the way I teach, I need a chalkboard or a whiteboard. I don't do PowerPoints, and I'll talk a little about that later. But you want to have a chalkboard or a whiteboard. So what do you do to schedule your class? Depends on your situation, but I usually hold classes in January, May, and September. I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I do this in Ann Arbor, Michigan usually. The exact date depends on the BE availability. I'm really lucky in Ann Arbor. Our club has a couple dozen accredited BEs. And so if I say, hey, I'm going to teach a class on such and such a date, chances are they can arrange to be 4 or 5 or 6 of them to come to hold the test session. So, and your mileage may vary on that. You want to avoid dates of regularly scheduled BE test sessions. So our club does it on the second Saturday of every month, so I always avoid the second Saturday of every month. The other thing I found too, so I'm in Ann Arbor, Michigan, right? That's where the University of Michigan is. I have to avoid whenever there's a home football game. Because I can assume that I'm going to have a low turnout on a football game.
Traffic would be so bad nobody could get to your site anyway.
Well, yeah, probably. That could be true too. At least going by the stadium. So anyway, so I probably should have put another bullet point in here. Avoid other big local events in your area. So how do you find the students? Well, one thing I do is I have a mailing list, and that mailing list includes all these different groups here. Local ham clubs. So when I put out a notice, I send it to all the local ham clubs. I inform the section manager. If you're not a registered instructor with the ARRL, you want to become one, because then you can put your class on this ARRL Find a Class page. Local maker groups. We have a local maker group in Ann Arbor that has a mailing list, and I posted that mailing list. Skywarn Search and Search and Rescue teams. They're always usually interested in these kind of classes. And then event calendars. In Ann Arbor, we have a publication called the Ann Arbor Observer, and they let you post events on their website for free. So all these avenues are a way to get students to come to your class. The big thing is the mailing list. So if you go to my website, KB6NU.com, right on every page, but in the right sidebar, there's a link to sign up for my mailing list. And I have about 400 or 500 people on that list right now. And they get notices when I'm going to hold the next class. And some of those people actually have been on that mailing list for quite a while. But after a year or two of getting these notices, they finally decide to come to class, and then they get their license. So this mailing list has been really a great thing. I put anyone who's ever expressed an interest on the mailing list. I encourage my friends to refer students and put it on the mailing list. And like I said before, I put ham clubs and MCOM groups on this mailing list as well.
Do you include, and do you find you've gotten cooperation and good response from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts?
I haven't really, how should I say it? I think the question is, the answer is yes or no.
It's a two-part question.
Oh, yeah.
Do you engage with Scouting as a means to advertise?
Yeah, I probably should do more, but I haven't, right? So, that's kind of on me. See, in Ann Arbor, we have the University of Michigan, and that has a very good club. And actually, I kind of take credit for being such a good club because I teach classes, and I get this is true. I take credit for a lot of things, maybe I shouldn't, but in fact, this is funny, to go along with it, not to divert too far. I actually take credit for POTA, because the head software developer for POTA was in one of my classes. So, it's a stretch maybe, but
That's a leap.
Yeah, okay, so. But, you're probably right. I probably should do more with Scouts. I think the problem with the Scouts in our area is that they changed the organization and all, and I didn't keep up with that. So, but that's a good point. I should connect with them again, probably.
The Radio Merit Badge is still the Radio Merit Badge.
Yeah,
that's still a source.
Right, our club did a couple of Radio Merit Badge sessions a couple of years ago. I say a couple, but it's probably been 10 or more. And it was a mass session. We had a couple hundred kids. It was really crazy. But anyway, you're probably right. I should reconnect with them, and I should put that on the slide.
Not trying to divert the conversation toward it.
No, that's good. So the next thing you want to do is choose a study guide. Well, I have one that's just perfect for this. And really, like in a way, it really is, because it covers all the material. It's free. Anybody can download the PDF version of the study guide for free. And I think it works really well for this one-day tech class. And what I do in the class is I actually cover the material in exactly the order in the study guide. And so like people will bring it with them and follow along, and it really works great. It really works great. Of course, other study guides will work too. If you have a favorite one, feel free to use it, obviously. But mine is free, and
Free at the right price.
What?
Free at the right price.
Yeah. It's less expense that someone has to go through, right? It makes it just that much easier for them. So let's talk about actually teaching the class. So I'm a big believer in no PowerPoints. I mean, I get probably every month somebody sends me an email saying, "Hey, you got PowerPoints? We want to teach a class," and I strongly discourage that. Because there's a lot of material and you have to cover it very fast. And first off, you have to make a ton of PowerPoints, right? And secondly, I think PowerPoints just put people to sleep.
Jay, have you ever considered using ChatGPT to make a PowerPoint?
Wait a minute. My club, I helped organize a ham camp for my club 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
We used Copilot to feed your documentation into we fed your guide into Copilot.
Yeah.
And we got a complete deck of slides.
Well, there you go.
All of us proofed our own sections to make sure the information was correct.
Yeah.
And we used it to also intersperse some appropriate entertaining graphics to help with some of the harder
Okay.
concepts. So
There you go.
I'll share the deck that I wrote down.
Okay.
And I welcome your feedback.
Okay. You know, something, and again, this is my style. I even though they may be the greatest slides, I will never use them. I'll just tell you. I'll tell you in advance.
No offense. I'm just curious about what you think about how they like to
Yeah, no, that'd be great. That'd be great. But like I say, I don't use them. So what I do is, and I think this is the truth. That's why you need a whiteboard or chalkboard. Is just by drawing stuff on the board and moving around the room. I think you keep people away. So that's just my style. If you want to use PowerPoints, that's up to you. But in a way, I would discourage it. But that's me. So I tell lots of stories in the class, and this is what you might want to think about too. Stories that really stress the points you're trying to make in the questions. And my favorite one is from my own experience. So I got back on the air about 2002 or so. I'd been a ham a long time, but I got back on the air in 2002. And I went out in the backyard, I put up a 40-meter dipole, I got my antenna analyzer, tuned up the antenna, everything looked great. I go downstairs, connect it to the rig, start calling CQ. The next thing I know, my wife runs downstairs, she says, "What the heck are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm calling CQ." She says, "You're opening and closing the garage door." And I get that same reaction every time I tell a story in class. And what is this emphasize? I tell this story when there's the question about the ferrite chokes, because the solution to the problem was to put a ferrite choke on that line, the wire from the switch on the wall to the garage door. No problem ever since. So that's what I'm saying about telling stories. Is you want to tell stories. Another one I like is, since I got your attention, another one I like is, early on, when I was teaching these classes, there were two kids in the class. One was 10, one was 11. They were brothers. And when I talk about Ohm's law, I say, well, it's E equals I times R, but with some simple algebra, you can get the other forms of the equation. I equals E over R and R equals E over I. And I hear this voice from the back of the room, "Well, yeah, but we haven't had algebra yet." So those two kids passed. So I tell that story, you know, right toward the beginning, because that's when I cover the technical material. And I hope that gives people more confidence that they'll be able to pass the test. If those 10-year-old kids could do it, you can do it too. So, you know, I like to tell stories.
The Ohm's law math is actually talking about 7th or 8th grade.
Yeah.
It's simple division and multiplication.
Yeah. So the other thing you want to do, obviously, is watch the time. Right? What I do, since I use my own study guide, is I have a sort of a large print version of my study guide that I make, and I use that as my script for the class. You know, and like I say, I go straight from the start to the beginning. And actually, on those pages, I have, you know, morning break, lunch, afternoon break. So when I get to that point in the script, I say, okay, time for a break. So you have to watch the time, because if you only have 6 hours, and at one point I had to really watch the time, because this one we did it at a local children's science museum. We had to be out exactly at 5 p.m. We couldn't stay any longer than 5 p.m. So I had to really make sure I stayed on time, so that it gave the VEs enough time to get through the test session. So watch the time. Let students ask questions, but don't let the questions bog you down. You know, sometimes people ask, like, really, especially if there's like technical people in the room, right? They'll ask some real technical questions, and you want to answer them, but you don't want to take too much time doing it, because again, you have to get through all the material. So what I do in that case is I say, look, you we can't discuss that really kind of any more in depth here, but let's talk about it afterwards, or send me an email afterwards, or whatever. And that works out.
When somebody wants to get too in-depth and too in detail in a particular question, have you ever taken the approach of high level, the answer is this, here's a brief explanation, and you don't need to know any more than this in the test, but let's discuss it later if you want to.
Yeah, I always say that.
Okay.
I always say, no, you don't need to know it in any more depth for the tech test.
Yeah.
And we're just going to concentrate on the tech test. So I take two short breaks, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and half an hour for lunch. And so that all fits into 6.5 hours of instruction. I usually start at 9 o'clock and then 3:30. Usually the BE test sessions are over by 5, depending on how many people are in the class.
What's your pass rate of the exam?
So I've had anywhere from like 80% to 100%. And in fact, I just had 100%. I taught this class in Omaha, Nebraska, oddly enough, and I had 100% there. Usually,
And 110% success rate in Omaha because one of the candidates has
oh, well, there you go. So I had 110%. Yes, sir.
Your PE sessions are all people who came into the class, basically no knowledge of radio. They take their class and then a few hours they hear the class.
You know what? No, most of them have had some, at least know a little bit about it. And what I do is I tell them that, I don't know if it's on my slides anywhere, but probably not. I probably should put it on here. I always recommend that they at least read through the study guide once or twice before coming to class. If only because there's so much terminology, right? In fact, one BE group I was working with said, really, this test is all about terminology.
Yeah.
It's almost more so than the actual material, right? Think about all the rules and regulations, and then like the operating controls, and all that stuff. It's all terminology. Q signals, the two questions on Q signals. So, if I would hazard a guess, probably less than half had no background at all, or no knowledge at all about it. Yeah.
What demographics do you target?
You know what? I'll teach anybody, right? No, seriously. Like I don't really target anyone except, and I'll talk about this a little bit later. I got a grant from ARDC to teach classes at like cybersecurity conferences and hacker conferences and maker spaces and stuff. And those people obviously were targeting more technical people. But really, anybody can come into my class that wants to. But you obviously find the people that are really interested in technical are more successful.
Have you ever, after the test session, maybe given an opportunity for them to actually get on the radio, some insight on how to set up their radio?
Right. So the question is, do I ever give people a chance to do something like set up their radio or anything after the class? Usually not.
As the first contact, the first setup.
Yeah.
It's sometimes they need help with that.
Right. Unfortunately not, because we've already taken up so much of their time. By the time they finish the test, they've just had it, right? Usually, they said, it's really tight. But what I tell them is, anybody who's ever taken my class can consider me their Elmer, right? After the class is done, email me, call me on the phone, and I'll help them in any way I can. And we have a great club in Ann Arbor, and our club does that. So our club sort of does that function. And when I teach at the University of Michigan Amateur Radio Club has all those kind of things. So I don't do it personally, but
The next thing on your slide there.
oh yeah, there you go. So like I said, it's following up. So as I said before, the only way people are going to become real hands, right? I use that term loosely, is by doing things. So I tell everyone that, you know, consider me their Elmer. You know, I get fairly good response out of that. You know, not everybody that's in the class is gonna become a quote unquote real ham, right? They, for whatever reason, they just wanted to get the license. Their dad was a ham, or their mother was a ham, or whatever. They just want to get the license, and that's okay. So, but the ones that really want to do things, I encourage them to contact me and you know, come to our club meetings and all that kind of stuff. And that's what I do. This fellow here has written a very good article. You can probably still find it on the ARRL website. If not, and you're interested in this, contact me and I'll send you a copy of it. But here's some other things that sort of follow on classes, you know, like you say, programming FM radios, how to use a multimeter, how to solder, all those things are things that could be done to follow up. So for more information, I basically have this talk on my website. You can go there and see it. ARRL resources, they actually have, you know, if you know me at all, you know I'm maybe not the biggest ARRL booster, but they have a good page for instructors, and I would encourage you to become registered instructors because they you know, you can make use of that and get your classes on Finding Class. So let me talk a little bit about this grant I alluded to. So I actually used to work for ARDC. ARDC, are people familiar with ARDC? Okay, ARDC, and they're right over here in Building 1. It's short for Amateur Radio Digital Communications, and it's a private foundation that gives grants to amateur radio projects and amateur radio clubs for different things. You know what? In my case, I got a grant to teach ham radio classes at venues where I thought should have more ham radio operators. That's why I call it the ham radio evangelist. I'm bringing ham radio to the tech community. And I got hooked up with this group called Ham Radio Village, which is a bunch of crazy guys like this guy here. Oh, that guy back there. What? Sure. It's over here.
I thought about it, but
How do we do it?
So I'm Terry Shano, NB0O. I guess Dan's my owner, according to the slide a couple slides ago. I'm a volunteer for the Ham Radio Village, and a couple years ago, actually, for the DEF CON before the one I'm wearing the t-shirt for right now, I get an urgent message from one of Dan's clubmates in Grand Rapids, who's also in the village, and he says, we don't have a venue for Ham in a Day. And I said, not a problem. I'm the idea guy. I'll get back to you in a day or two. Let me go fishing. So I called a bunch of the hotels around the convention center, said I need a room for 50 people for half a day or a day or whatever, and how much is that gonna cost me? And they're like, 15 grand. Ooh, that's outside the budget range, it's not gonna work. So I grabbed another fishing pole and I cast a net, and I got another idea. Okay, I called the library and I said, do you have a room that can fit 100 people for a day? And they said, yes. And I said, what's it gonna cost me? And they said, nothing. And I said, perfect, we'll take it. And then I got back to Dan's clubmate and I said, Justin, I think I found an answer. Asked Dan what he thinks, and it was not a great fit. We're not probably gonna use that venue again, but it got the job done, and I think we had about 3 weeks notice or something to pull that off, and we did, and it was fun, I thought. The challenge of figuring out the logistics on the fly. And
I actually didn't know he was the one that raised there. That's excellent.
Yeah, so Dan's great, the class is great, and the village is great. If anybody wants to get some contact info about the Ham Radio Village, there are at least 3 of us in the room that I see right now, and I got some stickers and stuff we can talk to guys.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So I hooked up at Ham Radio Village, and I got this grant. It pays all my travel expenses, and I've been able to. I've been doing this over the last several years now, and I've taught at DEF CON, Hackers on Planet Earth. You might have heard that. That's the conference run by 2600 Magazine. And recently I went to the Southern California Linux Expo and I actually taught two classes there, 2 days in a row. That was the first time I ever did that. And that was really an experience. But I mean, this has worked out really great. We've licensed hundreds of people over that period of time. And in my mind, these are really the kind of people we want in ham radio. They're young, generally younger on average. They're very creative. They're very technical, and once they get their license, they're pretty driven. So this has turned out to be really a great thing. Like I said, I have hundreds that attended the classes. And so this last bullet here, what I'm trying to do now, basically within Ham Radio Village, but outside too, is to create more teachers. I mean, I can teach a lot myself, but I'd like to see us grow the number of teachers and grow the number of venues. So if any of you all are interested in this, let's talk about this because while we don't really need money right now, we are going to probably be needing it in September, at which time I'm going to go back to ARDC, and if I can expand the program a little at that point, maybe we can do that. So anyway, that's just something to think about. I think that's all I got here. Yeah, this is all my contact info. Feel free to call me if you want, email me, whatever. And if there's any other questions, I'll take them now.
I got an interesting question. Do you think this would work for an extra class?
Well, so I don't. So there's a fellow in Grand Rapids who teaches a 1-day general class, and what he does is he doesn't teach like this, right? What he does is he really just goes over the questions. So he tells people to take practice tests and come in with questions that they get wrong, right? So I think the more technical it gets, the less the 1-day format will work. And there's like 600 some questions on the extra class test, right? So at the very least you'd have to do like 9 hours instead of 6 hours.
My biggest problem I got with extra is the math. I don't understand the math that way.
Well, yeah, and so that's that's a problem. Is that like there's questions, and of course you don't have to go into real depth, but like on the extra class test, there's questions about the Smith chart. Well, right off the bat, you're talking about like 8 hours just to really describe that. So that would be a lot tougher. That would. So what I was going to do with the extra class, and this didn't really work, unfortunately. I told people that I said, well, let's in my club. I said, let's do let's do Zoom sessions once or twice a week, and we'll cover it over a period of time. Well, only one person really showed any interest, and that never really got off the ground. I got a lot of people say that they would be happy to be teachers, but nobody wanted to be students for some odd reason.
It's hard to block the amount of time that you would need to do a good extra. An extra class.
Right.
Like say you've got to do it 1 or 2 nights a week for probably 3 or 4 weeks to cover all the material.
At least,
It's hard for especially families and kids to block that kind of time anymore because everybody's already so overscheduled.
Right. So I still think about it, but I haven't been very successful at that.
Have you ever pushed your class out
So when COVID hit, I did teach on Zoom, and that was sort of successful. I mean, it was successful in that a lot of people got licenses, but from a personal point of view, it wasn't that satisfying. Right? What I really enjoy, like talking to the students, and you can on Zoom, sometimes people don't even show their faces, right? So you don't see that little light little light come on when you tell them something, And so, from a personal point of view, that wasn't very satisfying. You know, there are people doing Zoom classes, but
Hard to read your argument.
yeah, you know, that's true too. So that's another thing I talked about that. So God, I hate this. That's another thing I do is I'm always saying, okay, I'll talk about, let's say we're talking about Ohm's Law, since I use that in the past. We'll go through all the questions on Ohm's Law, and I'll say, any questions? And I'll look at their faces, right? And you can usually tell if they understood it or not, right? And you can't do that on Zoom so easily. So that's a problem
I guess the reason I ask is I would like to observe one of your classes.
there.
I know if there's a way I can observe it via Zoom.
Well, I'll tell you what you can do. So the University of Michigan is like a wonderful place to teach, obviously, right? I mean, they've just got the setups, right? So I teach because I do it under the aegis of the U of M Amateur Radio Club. I get to use one of their classrooms. They can record any session in one of those classrooms. And not only that, this is the really cool thing about that, is they have banks of microphones up in the ceiling of these auditoriums, and when somebody asks a question out in the audience, those microphones zoom in on that person somehow. So it even not only captures the lecturer, but it captures the questions from the students. So there's a recording on my YouTube video, on my YouTube channel. I should have put that on there. I didn't think about that. Recording on my YouTube channel of a one-day tech class that I taught a couple years ago. And so you can see it. You can't see the drawings I make on the board too well, but you can sort of make them out. But you'll get the whole tone. And you don't want to sit through all 6 hours of it anyway.
Your call sign on YouTube.
Yeah. If you search for KB6NU, you'll find it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should put that on my slide. Any other questions? Well,
So how do you get the study guide again?
excuse me?
How do you download the study guide?
Just go to kb6nu.com/study guide, study-guides.
Okay.
And even if you just go to in fact, come up, I have cards, I'll give you a business deal. In fact,
All you have to do is Google it and it'll take you right there.
yeah. So I got business cards you can come up and get. I got stickers. If you had a sticker, kb6nu.com sticker, you can come up and get a sticker. I know, that's why I did it, because people like stickers. Anyone else? But seriously, feel free to email me or phone me, and I'm happy to help you answer any questions or whatever. You know, I take comments too, like if you do download the study guide and you see a spot in there where it should be, the explanation should be better or whatever, please let me know, because I'm all about making that as good as it can be.
This one's good, send it, no, put that in pocket right now. So,
I didn't say it in quite so many words.
So many nice words.
Well, thanks again. You know, I was really kind of wondering how many people would show up on Sunday morning, and I'm glad I got a decent crowd, so thank you very much.
Yeah,